From the library of the New York Stock Exchange, at the corner of Wall and Broad Streets in New York City, you're inside the Ice House, our podcast from Intercontinental Exchange on markets, leadership, and vision in global business. The dream drivers that have made the NYSE an indispensable institution for global growth for more than 225 years. Each week, we feature stories of those who hatch plans, create jobs, and harness the engine of capitalism. Right here, right now, at the NYSE and at ICE's 12 exchanges and 7 clearinghouses around the world. Now here's your host, Josh King, Head of Communications at Intercontinental Exchange.
It's coffee time, folks. As the temperature heats up outside, nothing sounds better than a crisp iced coffee enjoyed here in the Ice House. Our guest today is all too familiar with this wonderful beverage. Juan Esteban Orduz is president of the Colombian Coffee Federation, the North American subsidiary of the Colombian Coffee Growers Federation. You may know that Intercontinental Exchange builds, operates, and advances global financial and commodities markets, including the iconic New York Stock Exchange, where we are today. What you may not know is that ICE is home to the global benchmarks for the Arabica and Robusta coffee futures market. What lies ahead for one of the most sought-after commodities in the world? We'll find out right after this.
Hi, everyone. I'm Betty Liu, Executive Vice Chairman of the New York Stock Exchange and founder of Radiate. I started Radiate with the mission to make leadership learning more accessible to anyone interested in advancing their career and fostering a culture of excellence in their workplace. My team and I have handpicked and interviewed successful CEOs and thought leaders, asking them questions such as, what's your biggest time-saving trick? Or what's the best and worst advice someone gave you? You can watch the answers from experts such as Jack Welch, Arianna Huffington, Gary Vaynerchuk, Steve Case, and many more by visiting radiateinc.com. That's www.radiateinc.com. I'm excited about expanding Radiate, and I'm working with my team at ICE and NYSE to offer this content and engage with our vibrant community. Keep listening to hear John Chen, Chairman and CEO of NYSE-listed BlackBerry, answer the question, what is the most important soft skill for a manager?
The Colombian Coffee Federation is one of the largest global rural NGOs, representing 540,000 or more Colombian coffee growers and their families. While he may be miles away from the mountains of Colombia, South America, as president of the Colombian Coffee Federation, Juan Esteban Orduz is responsible for ensuring that the quality of Colombian coffee and the quality of life for those producing it remains top-notch. Welcome to the Ice House, Juan Esteban.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and I'm glad that we can talk to your audience about Colombian coffee.
We have to start out with the obvious, Juan Esteban. In 1960, Americans were introduced to Juan Valdez, a fictional Colombian coffee farmer representing the National Federation of Coffee Growers of Colombia and proudly promoting 100% Colombian coffee. Let's hear a little bit from that iconic spot.
Throughout Colombia, South America, for centuries the people have gone to the marketplace. It is here that they trade. It is here that they buy their coffee. Coffee grown by men like Juan Valdez. He washes the coffee by hand and then dries it carefully in the sun. The coffee is prepared for market as it has been for centuries, because for Colombians, their coffee is more than just the richest coffee in the world. It is a national heritage.
The commercials turned Colombian coffee into one of the most recognized brands in the world, Juan Esteban. Tell me about it.
Well, it's a long and beautiful story, and this ad brought beautiful memories. So thank you for putting it on the air. When Juan Valdez was created, there was a big work with people here in the U.S., people in Colombia, in the Federation, thinking how can we tell consumers in the U.S. especially about the authenticity of Colombian coffee. And there were lots of ideas. And there was one idea that came up at the time by the head of the Federation in Colombia called Arturo Gomez. And he said, let's bring a coffee grower. I mean, what's more authentic than the real coffee grower? So the first thing is, Juan Valdez is not a fictional character. Juan Valdez, when you go to the Colombian coffee towns, you will see that they're all Juan Valdez's, and there are still many in some areas, although Colombia today is different than Colombia in 1960, who bring their coffee to the town for the Sunday market with a mule. So the loyal companion, Conchita, the mule, is still present there. You still see the mules, and you still see the coffee growers all over. So it's a beautiful story that started there, based on authenticity and how to differentiate Colombian coffee by telling the consumer, Colombian coffee is authentic. It's grown with passion, with love, and if you try it, and you'll be happy. You will have a great moment drinking a cup of Colombian coffee.
It is about love. My wife and I love the product and enjoy it really morning, noon, and night with a good coffee after dinner. The Federation is about so much more than Juan Valdez. What was its original mission before you got around the table and said, how do we introduce it to America? What were you trying to do?
The Federation was founded in 1927. And the way it was founded is coffee growers got together and said, okay, we need to sit down and see how we can have our voices heard. And how can we talk to the government? How can we can go to the market? And those people, and we all enjoy their vision more than 90 years later. They got together and they start to see how to improve quality, how to go out to the markets, how to make Colombian coffee become the best coffee in the world. One of the first things they did, and I like to mention this, is in 1938 they founded our research center. And this, I just want to illustrate the point of the vision they had. In 1938, no one was talking about research, about developing new products, about technology, about productivity, sustainability. They were already talking about that. And that's 80 years ago. And they were talking about that. They founded Cenicafe. They created a very veteran group of researchers. They continued working. In every conversation we have in the Federation still today, we always say, okay, how do we differentiate Colombian coffee from other origins? And this is always a conversation. And we keep thinking, depending on what's going on in the market, we go from, first we have to have the best coffee, not just say so, but really work on developing a very good quality coffee. We are, as you know, the biggest producer of washed Arabicas in highest quality. Then we came up with the Juan Valdez campaign. First it was El Exigente. Maybe you remember that. No, you don't remember.
I don't remember.
Yeah, you were not born. I wasn't born either. So. But and then Juan Valdez was born and in 1960. And then in 1982, there was also the point, okay, how do we move ahead differentiating ourselves? And we created the 100% Colombian coffee program that you mentioned in the beginning, which is we sat down with the roasters, the biggest roasters, mostly in the U.S., and said, how can we need to not just have the coffee, not just advertise it, but the consumer needs to see that what's inside the cannula, it's really actual Colombian coffee. So we did that, and we started advertising heavily for that. Those were different times in terms of the ICO and the quota system, so it was a different market. And people started to recognize not just the origin, but also the logo. And Colombian coffee in the U.S., in North America, and in many places in the world was basically Colombian coffee. Coffee in general was Colombian coffee, and the rest. And that was a very interesting thing. Then you had the new system after the ICO economic clauses were canceled, and then we said, okay, what's the next step? Consumers are thinking now. At that point, it was the era, let's say, of Starbucks and espresso-based beverages in this market, which were not new in Europe, but certainly new in the U.S. And we said we need to also to tell consumers that Colombian coffee is not just a cup of brewed coffee. It's also great coffee for espresso. So we created the coffee chain Juan Valdez as well. And we have about 420 or 30 of those in different parts of the world. And they serve a dual purpose. One, of course, they are profitable, but on the other hand, they tell the consumer, Colombian coffee is not just what was for our parents, the brewed coffee. It tells you whatever you want to have. You want to have a cappuccino, you want to have a latte, you want to have an espresso. Colombian coffee is good for that.
The logo is so good. It graced several of my T-shirts growing up. I see it in my mind's eye. All of our listeners will remember what it looks like. But take us back a little bit, Juan Esteban, before 1938. give us a little bit of a history lesson in how coffee came to Colombia.
Okay. Coffee came to Colombia. It is said that the expansion of coffee, when it came to Colombia from Africa in the 1800s, the expansion of coffee was, and I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what they say. There was a priest that loved coffee. And every time you would confess, you go to confession, he would tell you have to plant coffee trees. And it was part of your, let me call it punishment, if that's the appropriate word. But the fact of the matter is that coffee started to expand quickly. And by the 1920s and early 1900s, the coffee growers said, okay, we need to really make this serious. We have to organize ourselves. We have to find a way to have a better living for the coffee growers. And we need to pay a lot of attention to the international market. And of course, the U.S. market has played a significant role for Colombia. The way Colombian coffee is grown, I mean, if you look at the map of Colombia, remember, Colombia is one first thing to say is that many people think Colombia is a small country, but Colombia is twice the size of Germany. So it's a significantly big country. And then you have the Andes mountain chain. When the Andes come into Colombia from Ecuador, they go from all South America on the west coast. They open 3 mountain chains. So we have half of the country covered by 3 huge mountain chains. So you have every possible altitude and different types of soil, different types of climates in the different parts of the country. Beyond that, what also the farmers start to do is, okay, we're growing the Arabica beans. How do we make this be a great coffee? So first, start picking the coffee, only the ripe beans. That has made Colombian coffee be a great product for the market, for consumers. When you say, coffee growers pick the coffee with love and they cherish the bean and so on, this sounds like advertisement, but it's true. If they really, in any given crop, they will harvest, they will go to a tree 6 or 8 times and pick in each tree only the red beans. So that's what's one first thing. The second thing is very carefully treated and washed and cleaned and everything, so it's very pure. When you look at a sample of Colombian coffee versus some other origins with not such high quality, you will see it's a beautiful beans, all look the same, the coffee we export, and all very clean. You don't have, beyond the bean as such, you don't have sticks, stones, or nails in the coffee. And that's thanks to a very, very thorough process that is made by the farmers. And the Federation made when they got together, the farmers that created the Federation, part of it was, okay, we need to control that only the best coffee is exported. They had a great site. We had a wonderful product for the international market, but at the same time, the coffee that was left behind in Colombia was not the best necessarily. So Colombians did not drink such good coffee, and the market was drinking the best of our coffee, which made a great platform for Colombia and for the coffee and for the coffee growers. But we didn't develop the culture of very high quality coffee, which we are developing now. So now in Colombia, there's an explosion of I guess like everywhere else in the world, of new coffee shops, of baristas, of espresso-based, cold brews, whatever ideas they can come up with, and they come up in the world, they come to Colombia first, and everybody is experimenting with everything. So we have a new explosion of that. So it's been a process, the whole thing of getting the best quality coffee.
So the harvest season is annual, one time a year?
It depends on the time of the year, and that's a very good question, because the Colombian landscape in coffee has changed a lot. If you look at 50, 60 years ago, you had the central, what we call the eje cafetero, the coffee region, let's say. It was centered northern Colombia. They produced the majority of the coffee, let's say 70%, 75, 65, depending on the time. And they had one main crop, which is in the second semester. Then coffee started to move to the south as well. And the biggest producing state at the time was Antioquia. The state of which the capital city is Medellin. Started to move south, And now they produced typically 30% of the coffee in the first semester, which is when the crop takes place in the south. And we used to call it, the big was the main crop, the other one called mitaca, the midterm, and the mitaca is the word that we use there. Now, and they start to shift, and now you have close to 50-50. Interesting enough, in that to illustrate the point of how it has shifted, it has changed. The biggest producing state is not anymore Antioquia, which is the second biggest, very close second, but a second. And the biggest is Huila, which is in the south. And those are completely different coffees. And we have today about a 50-50 situation in terms of production, first semester, second semester.
And then pick up its movement to the North American and European market. It's picked and harvested in the various states of Colombia, washed, prepared, selected, and then sent north and east. How does then it make its way into either packaging from the various brands or at Starbucks or other retail establishments?
Typically, what happens is, as you have in Colombia, you have, or any country for that matter, you have in this day and age, big coffee companies. They have a presence there, directly or indirectly, through traders or exporters. And they will go and search for the coffee. In some cases, you're looking for mainstream coffee. In some cases, you're looking for specialty coffee. You want a certain cup. You want a certain community. You want a certain type of values behind the coffee, organic or certified by someone because of certain practices. You purchase the coffee. In some cases, it gets many containers to one customer, the much bigger roasters. In some cases, it's very small. Some buyers want just 5 bags, 6 bags, 10 bags, so micro lots of coffee for a small roaster, for a small shop somewhere in the village here in New York. Mm-hmm. So all these things take place from the mainstream and to the very specialty and very very exactly, very rich and very special coffees. So it's a whole it's a spectrum of coffees that you can.
So into the business of coffee and how it's purchased, traded, priced. Can you explain for our listeners how the commodity market works for coffee?
Yes, it's interesting because the coffee, the reference price, let's say, is the C contract, the futures contract of the exchange at ICE. And that fluctuates with the market. It's a market-based price. And then coffees have a premium or a discount on C in ICE. So if the ICE is, or the exchange is the purchaser of last resort. Typically, the coffee moves in and out. It moves to the customers directly and so on. But the reference price is the C contract.
And we should explain for our listeners that ICE, Intercontinental Exchange, is the company that acquired the New York Board of Trade. Is that right? Which was you remember from, our listeners will remember from Trading Places, that coffee was traded in the open pits, and now it's fully electronic using the process you're talking about now. So when you're referring to ICE, that's Intercontinental Exchange.
Exactly. The C contract, the C price is the reference. And then when you negotiate coffee, you negotiate C plus something or C minus something, depending on premium or discount on what you're dealing with. The reference price is the price that the market establishes, and then you have the coffee just flows from the producing country producer to the roaster or to the trader directly. Doesn't go. The price is the reference.
How's the market changed over the course of your career?
I joined the Federation 15 years ago, so I have 15 years experience with coffee, and it was already changing. I think it's on one hand the price situation is very concerning. It's dramatic for producers right now, but at the same time you have an explosion of specialty coffees, and one of the things and of values behind the coffee, you had the Starbucks situation creating coffee shops and places where we want to drink the coffee and so on. So that changed a little bit the landscape, or a lot of the landscape. Especially in North America, which is the biggest consumer. And then you start to have a lot of consumers being more and more discerning, having more information. I think the internet played a key role there, because now they can track the coffee and they say, where does my coffee come from? I'm going to say from coffee from, which happened to me. This is an anecdote. I went to a meeting at CFTC years ago. And then I met a person there who said, I'm being told you're from Colombian Coffee Federation. This was in, I want to say 2004 or 5. And I said, yeah, sure. I drink coffee from Toledo y La Huateca. Toledo y La Huateca is coffee from two different municipalities, but basically one region. And I said, oh, wonderful. Yeah, I buy it over the internet, and I have checked it. I checked it out. I've seen everything, region over the internet, everything. That to say that consumers now are very, very discerning. They want to have a good cup of coffee. They want certain values behind the coffee, and they want to know where the coffee comes from. Beyond just the values behind the coffee, they want to know where the coffee comes from, and in some cases, who grows the coffee. Some people want coffee from a certain estate or certain small community in a certain place. Now we're moving to not just the specialty, but also the values market. And now our goal, what we're working on, and I'm very glad to be in charge of that program, is the version will be 100 years in 2027. When that happens, when we celebrate our first centennial, we expect to have 100% of the farms be sustainable in Colombia. So we call this a 100-100 program. Mm-hmm. Because we think the next step for differentiating ourselves from everybody else in the market is be sustainable and have the whole country be a sustainable country for coffee. No country has done that before in coffee or any other crop in the world. So we're trying to, this is our next big step as Federation and as a country.
And I want to get more into that in a few minutes. Just on your concern about the current price of coffee, a factor more of declining demand or expanding supply or both?
Let me tell you something. I think there are lots of theories, and there are as many answers as people you ask a question to. Some people say it's a matter of just demand and supply. Some people say at this current point, people are expecting the crop in Brazil. Some people say this is a lot of speculation by non-coffee players, just financial speculation, let's say. To what extent is something that no one really knows exactly what is what. The big concern is if you look at what happens is coffee has been close to around 110. Let me give you two figures. In 1982, the coffee quota system was in place until 1989, and then it was canceled as such for the 100% free market. In 1982, the pound of coffee moved between 118 and 141. This week, coffee was at 110. What that tells you is the following: coffee producers have lost between 50 and 80 or 90% of the purchase capacity in the world. So this is dramatic, and that's only if you took the pound of coffee and you put it using U.S. inflation in today's numbers. Coffee should be between 304 and 351, and that's a big drama. And to illustrate the point again, is if you were a coffee grower, people in Colombia, coffee growers in Colombia there are still a lot of those. The Willis Jeeps, these old Second World War Jeeps.
I love a Willis Jeep.
Beautiful. And we use them in the coffee region. We call them Jeepaos. And Jeepao is you get these Jeeps full of coffee and they put everything there. The whole moving the house, moving everything in those Jeeps. If you the equivalent of that Jeep in 1982, the basic was the Jeep called the CJ7.
I have a 1983 CJ7.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. Today, the Wrangler is the new name of that same Jeep. If you were to buy one of those Jeeps in 1982, you had to pay to produce 8,200 or 80, let's say 8,000 pounds of coffee. Today, as a grower, you have to produce 27,000. So you have to pay more than triple for the Jeep in terms of your income as for the exact same product, which is something you use for your farm. So what it tells you is that the situation is really deteriorating, and the pauperization process for the producers is currently dramatic. So I think the industry as a whole, the whole chain has to do something with it, and we need to sit down responsibly and see what we do to improve the situation of the farmers.
At ICE's Midtown office, Juan Esteban, we have a coffee roasting and testing lab. You've seen it. How important is it to the Federation that ICE maintains a traditional space for the market to use? I've seen the graders, tasting the the coffee and spitting it out quickly and making sure that everything that comes through ICE's grading lab is highest quality?
I think it's very important because C stands for something. C stands for the centrals, but that means a certain quality. If you were to get coffee from the exchange and you don't know if you're getting, let me go maybe more dramatic. You know if you're getting a washed Colombian or an unwashed Brazil, how can you trust the system? And this was our point was if you put such a big origin as Brazil, you may pull down the price. If you lower the quality, even the trust in the system will be at question because what's behind the contract? Is it what kind of coffee is there? So this is for us. It's very important that ICE respects the quality and keeps the foundation of the C contract. It's trustworthy.
We were speaking earlier about Ceni Café, arguably one of the most important coffee research centers in the world. What are some of the advanced technologies coming out of the coffee industry, and how will that aid Colombian coffee growers?
Are you ready?
Yeah, bring it on.
This is a long answer.
Okay.
Because Ceni Café has lots of things, but and some could seem kind of basic, but they're not. There's one part is one of the biggest threats to coffee is the illnesses that coffee may have. The coffee leaf rust, for instance, we call roya in Spanish, or the borer, which is the broca. The roya happens; it's like a fungus. It looks like rust on the leaves, and the borer is basically a little insect that goes and eats the seed, the coffee bean from inside. We had a serious issues with roya. Roya flourishes with high humidity, and Ceni Café has been able to develop rust-resistant varietals. I mean, there's not rust immune, but rust-resistant. With climate change, which is one of our biggest concerns now, is and you cannot really predict the rain patterns. So you can have lots of Niña phenomena, which is lots of rain, and that will increase the levels of roya. So they have developed those varietals. They have developed different technology for monitoring the crops. Now they're working, I know, in technologies and softwares that you will be able to use to monitor the crops with drones and certain softwares, not just visual software, but also temperature and looking at the colors and all those things that you can measure. That will make it easier to control the health. Promote the health of the trees. Just to something I forgot to mention before. Something very important in the Federation. We have a group that we call the Extension Service. We call they use yellow polo shirts. We call the Yellow Shirt Army because about 1,500 people. They move between 1,300 and 1,500 people depending on the time. That go all over the country to all the farms to help the coffee growers, best practices to fight against diseases, renovation programs to move from non-resistant varietals to resistant varietals. All those things we do, not just produce the resistant varietal, but also encourage people and make sure, incentivize that they will change, they will move to resistant varietals. And that's a big challenge because you have to make it resistant, but you have to keep the quality. And that's one of the key things. The last variety, Ceni Café varietal is.
Are the resistant varietals more expensive, or
No.
acquisition cost for
No.
the raw materials?
No, it basically we supply that to the farmers. We cannot force anyone to grow any tree, but it's incentive for them to move to resistant varietals. I remember being in a meeting, having a conversation with one of the biggest roasters. And he told me, you know what, you Colombians, I mean, you're done. You're out. I mean, you're going to become a small origin. This is it. I mean, you cannot lose a third of your production and then recover. By 2014, we were above 13 million bags. And last year, we were 14.2 million bags. And we are still in that. So we not just recovered, we increased and kept the quality. One more thing that they're doing, for instance, is we've been picking the coffee. Now, until even today, the same way we did when the Federation was founded. That's it. Go to the tree, pick the bean by hand, and so on. The new varietal Ceni Café keeps the quality, is resistant, but it's a little bit It's not so wide and not so tall. It's easier to pick the coffee. And at the same time, we have developed a product which is like a mechanical hand, let's say, with like a little metal fingers that vibrates a certain speed. That when it touches the branch, only the ripe trees will fall. And there's something that was designed by Cafe to receive the beans, and then you just wrap it and take it away. Not just so you don't have to you go, but you go with this mechanical thing, so makes life much easier. For your audience, I mean, for those who have not been at a coffee farm, when you see the people picking the coffee, it's very steep slopes. In some cases, you have to have a rope around your waist, tied to the tree so you don't fall. And then you have a bucket in front of you, and you will pick the coffee. And you pick the coffee, and then you go back. If you're a picker, then you will get paid by weight. So this new invention from Cafe will make it much easier for them, because you just put a mechanical thing. Only the ripe trees will, the ripe cherries will fall. They will be on the floor. There will be like a mat, a special mat they designed. Then you have to wrap it, and you just bring that up. So it should be much easier because and make it things more productive, increase productivity for farmers.
The process of harvesting the world's best coffee and the technologies that are driving advances in it. Our conversation with Juan Esteban Orduz continues after the break. We'll talk about the Colombian Coffee Federation's plans to become 100% sustainable within the next decade. That after this.
Betty here again, and as promised, here's a quick answer from John Chen, Chairman and CEO of BlackBerry, on the most important soft skill for a manager.
I think transparency is very important, and I think fairness is very important. If you could be transparent and could be fair, sometimes it might be tough, but people will follow you because they know where they sit. They don't have to second guess what you're saying, and I think that makes a sign of a true good manager.
You can watch John Chen's answer and other short videos by visiting radiateinc.com. That's www.radiateinc.com.
We're continuing our extended Ice House coffee break with Juan Esteban Orduz, president of the Colombian Coffee Federation. Juan, you are no stranger to the world of foreign affairs. Before joining the Federation, you walked the storied halls of Harvard University as a fellow at the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs. You also served as minister and deputy chief of the Colombian Embassy in Washington, D.C., but coffee is clearly a source of pride and passion for the Colombians and for you. How did you get involved in it?
It was when I was at the embassy in Washington, D.C. I was lucky to be part of a team that put together a program called Plan Colombia, which is basically the biggest bilateral program between Colombia and the U.S. for security, for not just for counter-narcotics and security in Colombia, which in turn is the one that led, in the end, this cooperation program to the peace agreement that we signed last year, or in 2016. I had a couple of conversations with the CEO of the Federation in Colombia, and they were very concerned about the prices of coffee. At some point, if you remember, coffee ended up being below 50 cents a pound, and we started to discuss, okay, how can we do this, and how can we raise the awareness, and how can we have let's say raise the level of discussion. So I had part of Plan Colombia, part of my work was to do lobby in the U.S. Congress, and so I said, why don't we have a hearing in Congress? Let me talk to a couple of congressmen who are friends of mine and see if we can do it. But I told the head of the Federation at the time, I said, but you have to come and testify and explain what's happening. So we did that. So as a result of that, the Federation told me, would you run our Operation North America? I'm by training, I'm a corporate attorney. I used to be working mergers and acquisitions and those things before deciding to not make money. And do something else and go to the government. I ended up saying yes. It also depended, I must say, on not 100% on me, because my wife she's a lawyer, and I was about to go to Harvard. I hadn't been invited to Harvard, and she was going to have a master's degree in law at Harvard. So I said, we had agreed that when I went from Bogota to Washington, she would follow me, and the agreement was the next step, I'll follow you. And I said, will you? And then I had to convince her.
As it is often in couples.
Exactly. So I had to convince her, and she said, okay, fine, let's stay in New York. And that was in 2003, and here I am. So it had nothing to do with coffee, with the bean, had to do with policy, because after the discussion in Congress with the U.S. industry, I started to have a very serious conversation with them and with the Federation, and so I started to get very much involved in policy for coffee.
So let's talk about policy a little bit. We began our conversation, Juan Esteban, talking about our good friend Juan Valdez. You told me that there are thousands of Juan Valdezes still working the mountainsides and the coffee farms of Colombia. How do Colombian coffee farmers working in these smaller scale farms compete with the mass production coffee operations in Brazil or Venezuela?
It's not easy in the sense that if you were to compete producing the exact same thing, it would be impossible. But the big difference, and I'm not speaking badly of any other coffee, is that we Colombian coffee growers understand that their strength is the quality. When you go to the industry, if you are a roaster, you're a big roaster, and you want to have high quality coffee the whole year round, timely delivered to you, the easiest thing is to deal with Colombia, because all coffee that comes from Colombia, the 15 years I've been here, I've never heard from anyone, this coffee I got from Colombia is lousy. Never. In some cases, like any business, you have some issue that the humidity of the port or something happened, but the quality of the coffee is such, intrinsic quality of the coffee is never bad.
Have you sensed that other countries are keeping their eye closely on you, trying to replicate your practices to try and compete at the level of quality that you were able to deliver month after month, year after year?
I guess lots of countries aspire to have quality coffee. Some of them have great coffees, but they typically don't have the structure that we have in place. Let me give you an example. I mean, Colombia has close to 1,100 municipalities. In 600 of those, we have coffee. We produce coffee. And in every single municipality that produces coffee, the Federation is present. And we have all these agronomists and Cenicafe and all those things that create a real structure. And we also have always had very strong support from the government. Because coffee in Colombia is very important, not just the romantic part of the love of growing coffee, but remember we had a country that had 50 years of conflict, and it's been, we see it. There are studies that show it, and you see it where coffee is grown. Social fabric is much tighter, and when social fabric is much tighter, the intensity of the conflict was less. So coffee has been a very, very. It used to be the spinal cord of the Colombian economy. Now the Colombian economy has grown a lot. Now you have oil, you have coal. From the agricultural products, we're the biggest. But in terms of social fabric, in terms of creating employment and development in the countryside of Colombia, it is huge.
How has the Federation succeeded in improving the overall working and living conditions for the Colombian coffee farmers?
We have lots of programs with a lot of social investment. We build and we work very closely with the government for that. Schools, hospitals, roads. I mean, you name it, and we are present in all those things. We have also significant port operation, every Colombian port, to make sure that, and we control that the quality exported is the right quality. And there's no monkey business going on with Colombian coffee. The coffee is being exported that meets the expectations of the market. So that is also not just the social programs, not just the quality, not just productivity, but also that the market trusts Colombia as an origin for high quality coffee. So it's a big scope of things. Plus, I include the extension service. All these people going all over, not just the scientists, but all these agronomists going all over the country, help working with the farmers. All those things make Colombian coffee. Colombia is an origin for coffee. A very special and very, very well structured one.
Americans love their coffee so much. Juan Esteban, is coffee tourism becoming a thing?
Coffee tourism is becoming a big thing in Colombia. In the traditional coffee region, what we call the Eje Cafetero, and also in the south now as well. So, and we have not just every possible sport there. It's a beautiful area. In fact, I invite you guys to go to Colombia soon, and all your audience. And it's a beautiful thing. You have beautiful colonial farms that have become like hotels where you can, for instance, you go with a couple of friends and their families, you can rent a farm. You have the beautiful house. You have someone that will cook you Colombian meals. You spend some days there. You have a pool. They have built a pool, everything, and you can pick coffee. And then you can. We have something, for instance, called the Parque Cafetero, el Parque Nacional del Café, which is a beautiful theme park, and the theme is coffee. For kids, it's fantastic. I mean, there are lots of things to do. If you go with kids, it's a lot, and the farm experience is very nice because you can pick the coffee, and that the first day you do it very happy. The second day you are happy still. The third day you say, okay, do I have to pick coffee again? Because you have every muscle in your body will be sore after 3 days of picking coffee. So, but it's a very interesting experience. And then you will be able to roast the coffee you picked. I mean, not the coffee from the farm you picked because it has to be processed, but you will be able to drink coffee from the farm where you are staying and you're picking the coffee.
So you're talking about the experience of an American coming down who is forced to pick coffee for 3 hard days in a row. But these farmers who spend their whole lives, week after week, year after year, in picking coffee. As we mentioned earlier, Juan Esteban, 2027, the Colombian Coffee Growers Federation celebrates its 100th anniversary. Tell us a little bit more detail about the 100-100 initiative for Colombian coffee, your goal to become 100% sustainable by 2027.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity, because this is what's taking a lot of our attention as an organization, and certainly a lot of my time, personally, and my team here in New York. Because what we expect to do is to create the standards for sustainability, which are basically the standards you would expect in any sustainable practices, going from the ones that many companies have. And I don't know if I'm allowed to mention companies here, but the AAA from Nespresso, the cafe practices from Starbucks, many companies have those, or the certifiers like Reinforced Alliance or others. And this is also something we are differentiating ourselves, but also we are responding to what the market is looking for. Many of the big retailers and roasters, what they are telling us is we want more sustainable coffee. And big retailers are saying, by 2020, by 2025, by 20 whatever, I want to have all my coffee, my source coffee has to be sustainable. So we've been working on sustainability all the time. At this point in Colombia, without having started a program yet, about 40% of the 42% of the farms are already involved in certain in sustainable practices. So we said, okay, we need to differentiate ourselves. We need to react to what consumers are looking for, and be sustainable. And then we started to analyze how we can be sustainable. You can be socially, environmentally, or economically sustainable. The environmental part, everybody's looking at. The social part, more or less, social part, I mean child labor, gender equity, all those things. But then the economic part, not many people are looking at that, which is basically the income of the coffee growers. And one of the things you see is that poverty is the biggest predator of the environment, of the society, of everything. Because if you cannot feed your children, if you cannot send them to school, you will not take care of the water source, of the tree, or a certain bird. And certainly you will not pay attention to other things of discrimination, those things. So we said, okay, we need to make all these three get together, develop the standards. We developed them already. We designed them already. We did the process was to design them. We've discussed them with some of the big players in the industry. I said, okay, what do you think of this? Give us your feedback, and they are all very happy, because this is not just the Colombians doing something there. We want this to be useful for the industry and the intrinsic good for Colombia, but also to be something that's good for the industry. If that works well, and we hope we did design the standards, as I said, we went to the field, make a survey on about 2,000 farms. We are processing that. We're going to the field again in November, around 2,000, and we will start designing the implementation program and working in that in next year, in 2019. And we expect to have not just have Colombian coffee become sustainable environment, socially, and more importantly, economically, but also that if you are a roaster, and you're looking for sustainable coffee, Colombia can become your one-stop shop, because every single bean that comes from Colombia meets the sustainability standards that the market is looking for. And this is something that everybody will follow path at some point. And what our advantage is not just the structure that we have, the will of the coffee growers, but also we always have had a governmental support when we develop these programs, because they recognize the importance of coffee for the social fabric of Colombia. One of the key elements here, and that's something that we've been discussing also with the industry, is climate change. And everything is connected, because people, when in many cases we talk to people about climate change, they think it's something kind of it's out there, but you don't know exactly what it is. In the tropical belt of the world, which is where we are, not where the U.S. is, but where we are, it is a reality. And you see it. You see the temperature changing. You see the rain patterns changing. So now it's very difficult to predict, how the crop is going to come. Is it the quality, the size of the bean? All those things are becoming very, very difficult. So we need to work on those things. We were not going to prevent or seize climate change, but we certainly can work on mitigation and adaptation to that, and try to make sure that whatever we do, will not increase that situation. And when you have the rain patterns changing, for instance, and you have a lower production, farmers will be harmed directly. The income will be immediately harmed. So who's paying for that? I mean, in the end, the farmer is the one that takes all the heat for everything, basically, and that's one of our biggest concerns. And let me give you some information, some data that go from a study not long ago. There's a study from the University of Hawaii, not about coffee, very interesting, which is they looked at the tropical belt of the world, and they tried to identify when is what they call the temperature departure date going to happen. Temperature departure date is the moment when the highest temperature in some place will become the lowest. In average, in the world, in the tropical belt, specifically, it'll be 2047 if we don't do anything. So in average, in the tropical belt, and they measured cities, they didn't measure the countryside, but it's basically the same for the whole. You're going to have this, in average, it's going to be the point where the highest temperature will become the lowest. And that's dramatic for every possible crop, and it will continue expanding, and it will reach the north and the south, beyond the center of the equator, let's say, at some point. So it's all those things are big concerns to us. We've been working on trying to address all those issues from the environmental standpoint, but the environment is, if you look at the rains and everything, are directly connected to the social part and directly connected to the economic part. So all those things we discuss with the industry all the time. We're trying to see what can be done. We're trying to do our part as Colombia with the 100 program, but that also we're working with many NGOs that work on sustainability, to try, in many of those in the US, to try to make sure that we can achieve the goal, and we become an example to the coffee world, and other countries, as I said before, will follow path when the moment comes.
If you do everything right, 2027, 100% sustainable coffee, the price for coffee will most certainly continue to rise. ICE operates, as we talked about, the global benchmark for Arabica coffee. Have coffee C futures played a role in, will they help you fulfill your mission?
Coffee C futures is basically the result of what's happening in the market. So yes, if it goes up, no, if it doesn't, basically. The fact of the matter is that the coffee landscape has changed significantly. If you look, remember that today you have more than 50% of the roasting of the world in the hands of three companies. It's the Nestle Group, the JB, and Starbucks, mostly the first two, and that changes the landscape. Let's not put any judgment here. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is, if you're to negotiate with those giants as a producer, things are more difficult. Your leverage or your capacity to do something is very difficult. So there's a lot of I want to say tectonic plaques shifting in the coffee market. Maybe at some point you are going to have some origins will disappear. The ones who are not very very well prepared to deal with the storm that we are in the middle of right now, and that would be dramatic. You will end up having production in the hands of 4 or 5 origins. Colombia for sure one of them, but then diversity will not be as much as consumers have today, and that will be bad for consumers. They will be really, really bad. You will not have what you have today. You can drink all these coffees that are fantastic coffees. Some are not so good, and some are crazy coffees. I mean, if you want to drink the coffee that some civet has passed through its gastric system, it's up to you. I wouldn't do it, but some people like it. But it's to have the option.
Yes.
And consumers will start losing options very soon if things continue the same way.
Well, this extended coffee break here in the Ice House has been a wonderful journey through Colombian coffee. Juan Esteban, I'd look forward to continuing it perhaps in Colombia with one of those Willys Jeeps, and you and I could sit down after a couple days worth of picking, and I'll rest my sore muscles on a stump, and we'll continue our conversation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm making here a formal invitation to bring you to Colombia and we'll do the same program in Spanish and English in Colombia.
I'd enjoy that. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
That's our conversation for this week. Our guest was Juan Esteban Orduz, president of the Colombian Coffee Federation. If you like what you heard, please rate us on iTunes so other folks know where to find us. And if you've got a comment or a question you'd like one of our experts to tackle on a future show, email us at icehouse@theice.com or tweet at us at NYSE. This show in particular came as a result of people wanting to know more about what Intercontinental Exchange does in its coffee futures business, and we're so glad to be able to bring that to you. Our show this week was produced by Pete Ash and Ian Wolfe, with production assistance from Ken Abel and Stephen Portner. I'm Josh King, your host, signing off from the library of the New York Stock Exchange. I'm going to have another iced coffee. Thanks for listening. Have a good week.
Information contained in this podcast was obtained in part from publicly available sources and not independently verified. Neither ICE nor its affiliates make any representations or warranties, express or implied, as to the accuracy or completeness of this information, and do not sponsor, approve, or endorse any of the content herein, all of which is presented solely for informational and educational purposes. Nothing herein constitutes an offer to sell or a solicitation of an offer to buy any security or recommendation of any security or trading practice.